Friends, I am Dr. Tapesh Bansal and I am an intensivist and physician in Gurgaon, Delhi. And this is another video, and this relates to pneumothorax, mainly in the ICU. And we shall be talking about the classification, the etiology, a few X-rays, then chest tube and drainage systems, which is often a mystery to the younger people, the number of drains, the bottles, the drainage system. Then what about suction and how to take care of the chest tube? Then most importantly, tension pneumothorax. And then the management of these patients on the ventilator, what kind of ventilator settings, and what has to be done in a non-resolving case of pneumothorax or bronchopleural fistula. And it will be pertaining to the ICU mainly, but definitely it will cover all the aspects related to the ICU. So it will be covering lots of the general topic of pneumothorax. So if you see here, uh, you can see a lucency as marked. Does this look like a pneumothorax? So if you can trace the line is rounded and it's not bulging inwards, right? It's bulging outwards. So this is actually a bulla, and this is a very common scenario in COPD patients who come with a lucency. Often it's a very big lucency, bigger than this, and a naive person may think that it's a pneumothorax and put in an ICD. But be very careful. Many a times these are bullae, and you have to do a CT, because in a bulla you don't put a ICD. This is a very common scenario in COPD patients, and they are prone to pneumothoraces. Now we move on to primary and secondary pneumothorax. Primary spontaneous pneumothorax occurs in patients who have normal lungs, and this is usually due to small blebs on the visceral pleura, which burst open and communicate with the lungs and into the pleural cavity, leading to leak of air. So you can see a classic pneumothorax here, and this is a large pneumothorax, as is quite obvious, and this is a supine film, and there's a rod in the center pertaining to deformity of the spine, and often these primary spontaneous pneumothoraces are associated with spinal deformities. Then this is a secondary pneumo. As you can see, the lung is diseased. So secondary pneumo occurs in those patients who have diseased lungs. And again, you can see very clear markings, and this is again a erect film. Now, I was talking about primary and secondary pneumothoraces, and spontaneous pneumothoraces and traumatic pneumothoraces are also another form of classifying. So, spontaneous is primary spontaneous, which I just told you, and there is a secondary spontaneous, which I told you, and these are the diseases, some of the diseases which are associated with it. And then there is a traumatic pneumothorax, which occurs when you kind of do some procedure or due to trauma. And around 5% of ventilated patients and ARDS patients develop pneumothorax, and similarly 5% of central line placements can be complicated by pneumothorax. Therefore, the use of ultrasound is advised to reduce the incidence of pneumothorax when placing a central line. And when you place a central line, the pneumothorax may not show up immediately, and the patient may actually deteriorate after 24 to 48 hours. So one should be aware of this, and do get a X-ray after doing a central line, and suspect it if the patient deteriorates after even 24 to 48 hours. Small air entry can be observed in the pleural cavity after thoracentesis, but these are normally not very big and they seal them by themselves. And trauma is another important cause. So trauma is generally associated with rib fractures, but sometimes blunt trauma without fractures can also lead to pneumothorax because of tear, and sometimes there can be occult pneumothorax which is not visible on the X-ray and picked up only on the ultrasound or CT. So as far as the pathophysiology of a pneumothorax is concerned, if you see here, uh, this is the visceral pleura and this is the parietal pleura. So normally there is a tear in this visceral pleura which is called a rent, and air leaks out as it's leaking out air, and once this seals, then only the pneumothorax stops enlarging, and this often seals by itself. If this does not seal, then the pneumothorax will go on increasing. And sometimes in trauma patients there is a tear in the parietal pleura, and this is called an open pneumothorax, and you got to seal it with some bandage so that air does not enter into the pleural cavity. So this is one way of the formation of pneumothorax, and this is by and large the way it is formed. But sometimes gas forming organisms can enter into the pleural cavity, and they can also give rise to air in the pleural cavity, and and it's common after laparoscopy also at times when you don't manage the insufflation of the peritoneum with your gases, then gases come up through the diaphragmatic pores into the pleural cavity, and sometimes they can be really large if you are not managing well in the operation theater. Now, the clinical features of a pneumothorax are acute onset of dyspnea and chest pain. These are the commonest symptoms and are mostly present. And then, of course, you may get a history of smoking often. And if the pneumothorax is severe enough, it causes distress, sweating in certain patients. On examination, you may actually get so you have absent breath sounds because there's a lot of air in the pleural cavity over the lungs. Similarly, you get a hyper-resonant percussion, then tachypnea, tachycardia, your saturations fall. The severity depends on the severity of pneumothorax. And if he's on the ventilator, there's an increase in peak and peak plateau pressures, and there's no real widening between the two, which you may see in a pneumonia or in pulmonary edema. And in tension pneumothorax, there is hypotension. Subcutaneous emphysema can always develop with pneumothorax because the facial planes are interconnected. Mediastinal shift in tension pneumothorax, and these signs above, some of them may not be picked up if the patient is on the ventilator, because it becomes a little difficult on the ventilator to pick up absent breath sounds and hyperresonant percussion if the pneumothorax is not very big. Also do remember that ECG in left-sided pneumothorax can mimic acute myocardial infarction by showing poor R-wave progression. So that resolves as the pneumothorax resolves, and that is because of the poor conduction that occurs because of the air that accumulates on the left side. Now, estimating the amount of pneumothorax in the erect film is a futile exercise to a great extent. Nonetheless, these are the methods which are described, some of the methods and the most popular ones. And this is the 2 centimeter width of pleural separation at hilum, and you can see the hilum marked out in the blue line. and if this is 2 centimeter or less, that is the B arrow, then this is a small pneumothorax. So this is one way, and the second way given by Light, who is also known as the father of pleura, is in percentage, and if it's less than 20% of the hemothorax, it's again a small pneumothorax, and 6 centimeter is the separation at the hilum, and 10 centimeter is the hemithorax distance. So this is the formula. As you can see, you cube it and then you divide it as shown here, and this here is 78% in the figure. But do remember that the X-ray is a two-dimensional image, while the air distribution occurs in a 3D distribution, and thereby the X-ray cannot pick up the correct volume. And CT is the one modality which picks up the correct volume. And when you are deciding about the amount of pneumothorax, the clinical symptoms actually become more important. Nonetheless, this is how you describe a small pneumothorax, and these are the two common methods. Now, when you talk about radiographic signs of pneumothorax in the supine patient, they are different from the erect patient. That is, the X-ray taken in the erect position is different from the erect X-ray taken in the supine patient, and the difference is because air moves up as per the laws of gravity. In the erect position, it moves towards the apex, and in the supine position, it moves up anteriorly and into the recesses above the diaphragm and into the costophonic angles. So that is why the X-ray looks different in the supine patient with a pneumothorax and different in an erect patient in a pneumothorax. So this is showing you two classic situations. The right one is much more common, that is known as the deep sulcus sign, and you can see the costophonic angle is much more radiolucent, and on the right is the anterior costophonic sign. You can see the lucency which is marked out with the red arrow, and like I showed earlier, there can be other signs. So this is to show you that the facial planes are all interconnected, and pneumothorax can give rise to pneumometacinum or subcutaneous emphysema. And sometimes what happens is you don't really pick up a pneumothorax on the X-ray, and you get subcutaneous emphysema. Somebody picks up subcutaneous emphysema, either the sister or you yourself while examining. Hear certain crackles on the skin, and then this should alert you to the possibility of a pneumothorax. Pneumometacinum is not that common, but a subcutaneous emphysema should make you look for a pneumothorax diligently. Now, what is a tension pneumothorax? So, if you remember the first slide which I showed to you, I showed you there was a tear in the visceral pleura. Now, air enters through this visceral pleura, and it keeps entering till the tear seals. So, in a tension pneumothorax, what happens is this particular tear acts like a one-way valve. Air enters during inspiration. When the patient draws a deep breath, a negative pressure is generated relative to the atmosphere, and air cannot exit during expiration because the tear shuts and it's like a one-way valve. So the air keeps on accumulating and the pressure keeps rising in the pleural cavity and reaches atmospheric levels. All pressures in the pleura and in the thorax are relative to the atmosphere. So the pressure becomes equal to the atmosphere in inspiration and sometimes exceeds it, and gradually as the air accumulates, the tension or the pressure keeps rising in the pleural cavity and the lung keeps collapsing, and depending on how much pressure has been generated, and that depends on how much air has been accumulated and how rapidly the lung collapses completely and the mediastinum can be shifted, the trachea can be shifted, and the heart gets compressed. And because of these changes, the heart getting compressed, the pulmonary vessels getting compressed, and because there is a positive pressure in the thorax, uh, because of the positive pressure in the pleural cavity due to the tension pneumothorax, the venous return decreases and the cardiac output decreases, leading to hypotension, which is further worsened by the hypoxia that these patients develop. So this is what is the physiology of tension pneumothorax. So please remember, like I just explained to you, that it leads to obstructive shock and it's a clinical diagnosis. It's a medical emergency, and once you suspect it, you have to put in a needle in the second intercostal space, and that has to be followed immediately by a catheter placement, ICD. Intercostal chest drainage has to be done, whether there is a tension pneumothorax or not, because when you put in the needle, if there is a tension pneumothorax, the needle is not sufficient to drain out all the air. And even if there is no pneumothorax, because the clinical diagnosis, you may have created a pneumothorax since you are entering the pleural cavity and rupturing the pleura. So either way, a catheter has to be placed once you put in a needle. And it's a clinical diagnosis. You suspect it on the basis of physical signs and the rapid deterioration. And if the patient is on the ventilator, there'll be rapid deterioration in the vital signs, and there'll be a rise in peak and plateau pressure. So that is how you detect it, and the blood pressure often falls. So it's medical emergency of the highest order. If you don't act immediately, you can lose the patient. And if the patient is not so bad, and if there is somebody who can do an ultrasound, you can put the probe and try to diagnose it. It will be obvious with the ultrasound. Now, another thing is that there's something known as an open pneumothorax. So this is an open pneumothorax when the air comes in from outside, and this is due to trauma, traumatic pneumothoraxes of whatever kind. And this is a closed one when there's a tear inside the uh, thorax in the inner part of the parietal lining, and sorry, visceral lining, and this is different from this, as you can see. So this is an open pneumothorax and this is a closed pneumothorax. Now, out of these methods, let us see what is the best way to diagnose a pneumothorax. So, clinical assessment helps, and we should all try to do the clinical assessment. X-ray is a good option and often tells you. Ultrasound, however, is a better method than the chest X-ray, and CT is the gold standard, which always picks up the pneumothorax, differentiates from other conditions, and picks up associated conditions, especially the condition of the underlying lung. Now, limitations of the ultrasound is that it is operator dependent. Subcutaneous emphysema, if it's there, then you won't get a good image. Occult pneumothoraces can be missed, and it is semi-quantitative. But the greatest advantage of ultrasound is that if the patient cannot be shifted for a CT, and you can do it immediately at the bedside. So it has great advantages, and apart from the small pneumothoraces, it actually picks up most of the pneumothoraces. And the ultrasound findings are absence of lung sliding and stratosphere sign, and there is a lung point which is the most specific, but we may not get it all the time, and absence of lung pulse. So that I will not go into, because that goes into the realm of ultrasonography of the thorax, but these are the findings that you should get. So should we treat all pneumothorax, or some can be observed? This is a slightly controversial area, and opinion remains divided on this. So, like I told you in the beginning, what is a small pneumothorax? If this is asymptomatic, you can leave it alone and just observe the patient, follow up the patient. and small pneumothoraces on blunt trauma which are occult can also be observed. Then if any of the pneumothoraces are enlarging or the patient becomes symptomatic or is on the ventilator, then they have to be treated with a chest tube. And close monitoring for signs of expansion is critical if you are not treating the pneumothorax, especially on the ventilator. Some people leave these small occult pneumothoraces alone, but it can be very dangerous. Again, opinion is divided, and close observation is required because you don't want the pneumothorax to go on increasing at night and the patient crashing at night. Now, how should a pneumothorax be drained? Catheter or chest tube? So, for most clinically stable patients, small bore catheters or chest tubes rather than a large bore chest tube because it's easy to put and patient is more comfortable and has equal efficacy. Please remember that the chest tube is quite uncomfortable for the patient and you often have to give analgesics. In primary spontaneous pneumothoraces, that is PSP, needle aspiration has also been advocated. So opinion again here is divided. You may put a catheter or a chest tube, small chest tube, or you may do a needle aspiration. For the larger pneumothoraxes, you would like to put a large uh, chest tube 24 to 32 French, and this is for pneumothorax with a large leak or which is draining fluid or blood or pus, empyema, because smaller ones get clogged, and if the leak is large, that is a large pneumothorax, then it is not drained by small bore chest tube. So in these conditions, you have to put a large bore chest tube. Then these are the complications of insertion, and these are not so infrequent, and often it goes into the spleen or the liver, and that is one of the biggest problems. And sometimes they are not positioned correctly even if they are in the thorax, and with the increasing duration of ICD, the risk of infection increases. So please remember that, don't keep it unnecessarily, just like any line or tube. And there is no role for prophylactic antibiotics in pneumothoraxes which are associated with trauma and are associated with fractures and tears coming from trauma. You may give antibiotics for 24 hours. That's the only role for antibiotics. Now, demystifying the bottle. So you have put the chest tube, as you can see here, and we have three different cartoons, A, B, and C. So this is often quite mystifying to everybody, especially our young trainees, as to what exactly is going on here. So figure A is actually one bottle system, and you can see with the red arrow, it shows the depth of the tube, the draining tube, which is below the water level. So this should be 2 centimeter below the water level, and it acts as a water seal and prevents the air from going back into the chest cavity. And the other is the vent to the atmosphere, the other tube which is opening outwards. So that is a simple drainage for pneumothorax, which is just draining air without any fluid. But sometimes there is a hydropneumothorax or there can be a hemopneumothorax. So here you actually need to drain the fluid along with the air. So that is in a three bottle system, that is bottle C. In bottle B, we are actually applying suction, and again we have applied a water seal, and the suction is shown by the arrow green, and the depth of the middle tube in the second bottle in the figure B is the amount of suction, right? So the green arrow is showing the depth of that tube, and that is the amount of suction that is being applied, and this is open to the atmosphere, and you can see suction is being applied to the wall suction. So that is how you apply suction to a patient which needs only drainage of air. Right. Now we come to figure C, which is a 3 bottle system, and this is for both fluid and air. As you can see, fluid is dripping down, and air is vented out into the second bottle, and again there's a water seal by the red arrow 2 centimeters below, and this is to prevent the air from going back. And then you have the suction control marked in green. So it's very simple here. You follow the suction in bottle B. Bottle B is suction applied for draining air. Figure A is only to drain the air without suction, and the 3 bottle system is to drain both fluid and air with the suction applied. And there are 2 seals, one seal, water seal, that is 2 centimeters below, and the other one in green is the control of the suction, right? So this is how it works, and there is no other mystery to this. And the depth of the water seal, that is 2 centimeters, is to prevent the air from going back into the lungs, just in case the patient draws a very deep breath, that is a very large negative inspiratory pressure. And suction is controlled because that is open to the atmosphere, and the depth below controls the suction because all pressures are relative to the atmosphere. So this is the understanding and the physics behind these bottles. It is actually physics, the pressures, the atmosphere, the negative inspiratory pressure. So it's a little bit of physics and a little bit of basic understanding of what is going on. So now that I've explained to you the drainage of the pneumothorax and any associated fluid with it, let us look at the chest tube closely. So as you can see, there are some bubbles here, and these are the air bubbles which come out from the chest tube, and bubbling signifies that air is still coming out. It is continuous initially, and towards the end, when it is resolving, it becomes intermittent. And every time the patient coughs or something, there can be a bubble or more than a single bubble. That's variable. And when there is no bubbling, generally that means there is no pneumothorax left, but we shall see that is not always the case. And this tube here, again I'll tell you, should be 2 centimeter. This is what is 2 centimeter, and they should be below the surface of the water level. This is the water seal, and you have to fill the water, otherwise this kind of dries up, and that can help the air to go back if there's a large inspiratory swing. So we have this water column, and the water column keeps moving, right? This moves because of the negative pleural pressure generated during inspiration, and the positive pressure generated during expiration. So if this is communicating with the pleural cavity, the water swing will always be there. And if there is bubbling, it means there is air leak and persisting pneumothorax. The water column swings with inspiration and expiration due to pressure swings in pleural cavity. And if the water column is not swinging, then there is a disconnection between the pleural cavity and the distal end of the chest tube. That means either there is a complete removal in between somewhere in the attachments, or the tube is blocked or kinked, or the pneumothorax may be fully expanded. So that is what really happens with the chest tube. Now, when do you remove the chest tube? So you remove the chest tube deciding upon two factors. One, radiologically, you look at the x-rays, and you look at the air leak. And the air leak, like I told you, is signified by the bubbling of the air bubbles. And when there is no bubbling spontaneously, you check on coughing. On coughing, there should be no bubbling, right? And X-ray should have resolved. So these are the two main factors. The air column may be moving or may have stopped moving. So it's a radiological plus the absence of air leak, which determines whether you are going to remove the tube or not. And how to remove the tube? Either you can let it be in place for 12 to 24 hours without clamping, or you can clamp it for 12 hours and then remove it. There are different ways. These are the different ways. So it's not very dogmatic that you have to clamp it or not clamp it, or whether it's 6 hours or 12 hours or even more. That is up to you. But this is how you decide when to remove the tube. Now, what is to be done if the ISTD is blocked? So please remember, the ISTD has many holes. So if you pull out the tube, you can just kind of open up the holes, or you can do a suction in that, or you can flush it with saline. Milking is not to be done, so that is very important. Please ensure there is no kinking, and daily inspect the ICD with regular flushing, and maintain the water seal and fill the suction chamber adequately, because the water tends to dry up. So these are very important aspects of care of the ICD, and it is very well known that the ICDs come out and the water dries up and the ICDs get blocked or they get kinked and disconnected. So care of ICD is imperative if you want the patient to get well. So here what do we see? We see the ICD has come out. As you can see, the hole is out, marked by the white arrow, and in the red arrow there is subcutaneous emphysema. Because the hole is out, the air is leaking into the tissues and you get subcutaneous emphysema. Now, what is the role of suction? I've explained to you how the suction system works, and this is to show you another figure, and this is actually the more modern method of using suction and draining air and water. And on the right is the wet suction drainage, which uses water, and dry suction drainage system on the left, which does not use water to regulate suction, but directly you can dial in the suction from the dial you can see on the left side of the system in the dry suction drainage system, and this is connected to the wall suction. And if you see here, principle is the same by and large, except that the water is not there in this, and you have this dial-in suction here. So that is what we are using most of the times. This is the Plurivac which we are using, but at places you can use the bottles also if you cannot afford it, or it's not available, or in resource limited countries. The bottle system is also used. Now, suction is usually applied after 48 hours if required, and use beyond 5 days is questionable. Up to 2 weeks may be helpful in certain situations. There are reports where suction applied for 2 weeks has resolved the pneumothorax, and up to 20 mmHg of suction is applied, and VATs may be more cost effective than persisting with suction. Another thing is that most of the pneumothoraces resolve within 48 hours. There's a gush of air leak as soon as you put the chest tube, and it keeps bubbling. Bubbling may be intermittent or continuous, and then gradually the bubbling stops, and you ask the patient to cough and see if there are any air bubbles. That is what is called an air leak. And if there is no air leak, no air bubbling, that means the pneumothorax has resolved by and large. So this normally happens within 48 hours in the pneumothoraces if they are going to resolve. Therefore, suction is usually applied after 48 hours if the pneumothorax has not healed. Now, what are the vent settings in pneumothorax and bronchopleural fistula? So this I have referred to Mechanical Ventilation, the book by Tobin et al. And these are the ventilator settings. You want to give as little positive pressure ventilation, because if you give too much positive pressure, the tear in the visceral pleura is not going to heal and air will continue to leak. Try to use pressure support because less positive pressure is generated in this. Then PRVC may be a good option because it gives the better volume with the least amount of pressure, and try to give zero PEEP. If you cannot give zero PEEP, then you apply the lowest amount of PEEP, because if you have ARDS, then you will have to give some PEEP if the FiO2 is 100%, and you opt for FiO2 100% and accept oxygen toxicity rather than giving PEEP. If possible, low respiratory rate and adequate IE with minute ventilation which is not too high, and allow for permissive hypercapnia, doing hypoventilation, and care of the ICD with sedation, because ICDs are painful and you don't want asynchrony and the patient struggling. How to diagnose a pneumothorax developing on the ventilator? So the pneumothorax developing on the ventilator is diagnosed by fall in SATs, tachycardia, rise in the P peak and P plateau pressure without widening of difference within a short time in assist volume control mode, and the thing is that the difference in P peak and P plateau pressure is very small, and it remains small in pneumothorax, because in diseases of the parenchyma this remains small. In diseases of the pleura, the difference remains small. It is only in diseases of the airways that the difference widens. So if you can rule out a parenchymal pathology, then you know you are dealing with a pleural pathology which is likely to be a pneumothorax, because you can differentiate between a pleural effusion and a pneumothorax, which is the other cause, that is the pleural effusion. Please remember, X-ray may not show a pneumothorax clearly, and ultrasound helps, or you do a CT, and any patient who develops a pneumothorax on the ventilator needs ICD. Other thing is, once the pneumothorax has healed, you should remove the ICD, or you can remove the ICD. There is no need to keep the ICD because the patient is on the ventilator. So that was an old concept, that as long as the patient is on the ventilator, don't remove the ICD if he has a pneumothorax. Once it is resolved, you can remove the pneumothorax. The other thing is, please be cognizant of the fact that once the patient is put on the ventilator, and if he has a pneumothorax already, he can go into hypotension. So there is a patient who has a pneumothorax, and you put him on the ventilator, he can suddenly crash in terms of his blood pressure. Now, why does that happen? So that happens because you put positive pressure when you put the patient on the ventilator. Before that, he was having negative pressure in his thorax, and the negative pressure was mitigated to a great extent by the pneumothorax. Nonetheless, when he draws a deep breath inwards, he generates a negative pressure in the thorax, which draws in blood, the venous blood, into the right ventricle, and the right ventricle pumps it out into the pulmonary vessels, which are compromised to some extent because of the positive pressure being generated in the pneumothorax, and thereby pumped out from the left ventricle. The moment you put him on the ventilator, the entire thorax goes into positive pressure, compresses the heart, and decreases the venous return to the right ventricle, and also compresses the pulmonary circulation, thereby decreasing the input to the left ventricle and the cardiac output, thereby causing hypotension. So please be aware of this and use whatever modalities you have to prevent this hypotension. Give adequate volume, use minimal sedation, and put as little positive pressure as possible when you put him on the ventilator. The best thing is you drain the pneumothorax before putting him on the ventilator. That is the best solution because the ventilator does not really help here. You have to drain the pneumothorax. Please remember, treatment of pneumothorax is draining the pneumothorax. So this is showing you the effect on the circulation leading to hypertension. Now is J7 and pneumo is not resolving despite ICD and suction. What are the options? So we are entering a gray area here, and this actually goes into the area of pulmonology rather than intensive care. Nonetheless, to complete the topic, there is insufficient evidence to advise one option over another. We can do VATS, which is the preferred modality now because it is faster, easier for the patient, and gives good results. In certain cases, we may have to opt for open thoracotomy and newer, less invasive techniques like placement of endobronchial valves using bronchoscope. You put the bronchoscope and localize the air leak and put the endobronchial valve there, thereby shutting off the leak. So these are some of the papers supporting the newer methods and the gray area in the treatment of non-healing pneumothorax. Now we come to this entity called re-expansion pulmonary edema. So this is seen in certain patients whom we are treating. When you put the ICD, these patients actually develop a pulmonary edema when the lung expands. And the patients who are prone to this are those in whom we apply a lot of suction or early suction, that is before 48 hours, or those patients who have a chronic large pneumothorax which is not healing. And this occurs on the side of the pneumothorax which we are trying to drain, and pathogenesis is not really clear, possibly because of the large pressure swings the capillaries get injured, and onset is within a few hours of trying to drain the pneumothorax, and the mortality is quite low, but definitely you can have mortality with re-expansion pulmonary edema, and you need to support these patients with NIV or high flow or even intubate these patients. But they do resolve if you take care of them, but if not treated properly, it can lead to mortality. Then this here is an X-ray of a patient with what? Can you make out what the arrow is showing? This is not a depressed diaphragm. If you note the two diaphragms, the diaphragm is not really depressed. The CP angle is not clear and it's a flat line. So this is actually a fluid level, and this is actually a fluid level which can mean either hydropneumothorax or it can mean a hemopneumothorax, blood or water. And again, is this a pneumothorax? Now if you see the arrows are not like that of a pneumothorax, and the shape is not that of a pneumothorax. So this is a very common scenario in the ICU. This is actually a fat line. What is a fat line? It is a fold of the skin at the back or a fold of the bed sheet which gives this kind of an image. So you have to be very careful. Actually, there are a lot of artifacts which can give lines on the X-ray, and you have to ensure that this is a pneumothorax and not something else. I told you earlier that it can look like a pneumothorax when there is only a bulla in the patient. There's a lucency and you think it's a pneumothorax. It's a large bulla actually, and often it's a bulla and not a pneumothorax. So take home would be suspect in acute dyspnea and chest pain or if there's a radiolucency in the lungs, recognize it if it develops in the ICU on the ventilator where it can be subtle. Rule out bulla and COPD. Again, I say this because this is very common. And institute correct treatment, which is placing the ICD. Treatment is ICD, and tension pneumothorax needs urgent evacuation. So some of the references, if you want to go through them for further reading, and